Hello and welcome. Thanks for joining me. We're going to talk about binding an interface to a concrete class in Laravel. We're going to talk about the purpose of an interface. We're going to show you how to create an interface, create two different implementations of that interface, bind it to the container, and then write a command that relies on the interface, which then calls one of the implementations. So let's go ahead and get started. First, let's talk about what is the purpose of an interface. So the purpose of the interface is to define what or how something is used in your application. This will define the public methods of a class. So if we write a command to send a text message to somebody, we're going to create an interface that says, if you want to send a text message, you need to implement a send SMS function. That send SMS function is going to require a phone number and the message. The thing is, you probably don't want to send a text message in your local dev environments, but you will want to in your production environments. So what we're going to do is swap out the implementations based on the driver that you have set in your env. Again, very important because the command will not change, but the implementation that is used will change. One will actually send the text message and one will send it to the log. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's create the interface. The first thing we're going to do is create a console command to send the text message. And what we're going to do is we're going to just create like an if statement, and then we're going to refactor into using an interface, because this will really help show you how and why we should use the interface. Okay, so we're going to do PHP artisan make command, and then we're going to say send SMS. Okay. We're going to name the signature send SMS. Send SMS. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to say if the env for SMS driver, we don't have that yet, is equal to, let's say, Twilio in this case. They're one of the popular SMS providers. Then we're going to use the Twilio SDK in order to send a text message. Else log the text message. We'll do it like this. And that's where we're going to start. So I'm going to grab the code that Twilio has. So the first thing to do would be install the package. And then the next thing that they have in order to send a text message is about 15 lines of code. So by doing it this way, we're only ever going to send a real text message if we've set the SMS driver to Twilio. If we misspelled Twilio or is set to something else, it would not send a real text message. Only ever send a text message when the driver is set correctly. Okay, so I've imported the client and we're all good. So this is complaining we don't have the SMS driver, so we're going to open up and we're just going to add SMS driver equals, and we can say either log or Twilio. For right now, we're just going to set it as, Twilio. But just to prove the point of all this. Okay, so this would actually send a text message, and then this would just be log info sending message to And this might be the phone number with message. And then we'll just make up a message. We've been trying to reach you about your car's extended warranty. Who doesn't need the extended warranty, right? So phone number message. So what we're going to do is replace this phone number. We're not going to set the from. We don't care what the from is. This is just because we're doing just a demo. We're setting the message. Okay. So this is what this might look like if we were going to send a text message inside the command. Let's test the command with the log for right now. So we're going to switch this and then, so we said send SMS. Okay, so if we check our log, look at that. We've got our sending message. We've been trying to reach you about your car's extended warranty. I forgot to add warranty. All right, so that's done. The next thing that we have to do is start to break some of this out. So this can get really messy. Let's say you are sending international phone numbers and there's an international provider that's not Twilio that has much better rates than Twilio. So for perhaps maybe you want to just have different providers. This is the type of pattern that you probably want to rely on. So you'd want to rely on the interface and not the actual implementation details. This command knows all the nitty-gritty details about how to send a text message, whether it is sending it via Twilio or putting something in the log. This command should not know those details, and I'm going to show you why. So let's go ahead and start creating the interface and those two concrete implementations, and then put that stuff in here. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to create a new directory called SMS. And then we're going to create a new class called SMS. And we're going to create this interface, and that interface for sending an SMS. So something that's implementing this interface needs to have whatever functions we define here. We're just going to say it needs to have a send function. And we're going to say it needs a phone number and a message to send an SMS. Very basic. It's intentionally basic. So that way, anything that's implementing this can do and implement things however they want. But at the very minimum in our application, this is what we require in order to send a text message. So now we need to create the two concrete classes. One of them is going to be log and one of them is going to be Twilio. So let's start with the Twilio one first. Okay, so what we're going to say is Twilio SMS is going to implement the SMS interface, and the IDE is going to complain that we don't have the methods that were defined in the interface. They're not implemented here. So we're going to have our IDE autocomplete them. And so we're going to take the code that we had in our command out of here. Put it in here. You'll notice one important detail. I did not take the if SMS driver out of here. That's intentional. When we go to bind in a particular concrete implementation, we're going to set it there. So That's going to stay out of this Twilio. This Twilio implementation should not know anything about that env variable. So let's go ahead and create another one for the log. And then this one's also going to implement the SMS interface. And we're going to grab the same code. Okay. We are going to remove this code as well. So now we've got blank if and else statements. Super important because what we're about to do is remove the logic out of this command. So we know that in the handle method, when we put a class, for example, Laravel will do its best to auto wire that class so that way we can use it. We've got a couple options here. If we put the interface, so if we put SMS, Laravel at this moment does not know how to resolve that. So what we're going to do is we're going to show Laravel that we need to auto resolve this based on the driver. The other thing that we could do here, which we'll start out with, is if we put Twilio SMS here, and then we also put log SMS here, like this, Twilio SMS. So what we can do, Twilio SMS, send phone number, message. What we can do here is log SMS, send phone and message. I'm trying to go in steps here. I think this is important because when you see that Twilio SMS and log SMS are doing the exact same thing, and they're doing the exact same thing because we defined the interface and they both implement the same interface, what's going to happen here is we can do SMS, SMS, and instead of going through the if else, we can just use it directly like this and completely get rid of this. Now the command does not know which implementation we're using. It doesn't care which implementation we're using. All it cares is that we're calling send. All right, so we're going to keep this, but what we need to still do is tell Laravel, how do we send an SMS? Because right now, PHP would complain because, well, you can't do anything with the actual interface because it's not actual code. So let's go ahead and tell Laravel to bind the interface to a concrete class. And the way we can do that is using a service provider. So let's go ahead and make a service provider. PHP artisan make provider, and this is going to be the SMS provider. Okay, so if we go into the providers folder, there's an SMS provider. We are going to use the register method. We don't need the boot at the moment, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete this. This is where we tell Laravel, this app bind, and then the first thing is the abstract. The first thing that we have to do is the abstract. It says abstract, but what that means is it's going to be the interface. So if we just do SMS class, and then the thing that we are binding it to. So for right now, we're going to do log. And let's go ahead and test it out. PHP artisan send SMS. Okay, so this is what I was referring to when the interface cannot actually do anything. It's telling us that SMS is not actually instantiatable. So something isn't quite binding correctly. So let's go ahead and take a look at what isn't binding. It's going to be in app.php. We need to import our provider that we just created. That's going to be app providers SMS provider. And let's go ahead and try this again. Okay, so no more errors. Let's check the log. And we can see now that we do indeed have our message. We also had the error message that was there from when we ran it and it wasn't binding yet. But here it is, it's working. So now let's adjust it so that it's actually using the driver from the env. So this is easy. We can open up the provider and let's use the match function from PHP. Okay, so we're going to say provider because we can have multiple. And there are plenty of different ways to do this. This is just one way of using it because if you wanted to use different providers based on various, if you were in a different country and you want to use one for a specific country, this is just one way to do it if you're setting it in the env. So we're going to use the match function. So we're going to say match, and then we're going to say env SMS provider or driver. And if you're not familiar with the match function, we're going to go and talk about that now. Okay, so the match function is super nice. It's similar to a switch statement, but what this says is we're going to match on anything in here. So this, for example, is going to return us log or Twilio, whatever we put in this value. And then what we can do is if it's Twilio, we are going to return the Twilio SMS class name. If it's log, we can do log SMS class. And then there's actually also a default. So if none of those match, we want to do class. We'd rather err on the side of caution to make sure that we're not sending messages when we shouldn't be. Okay, so now that we've got it set up, if it's Twilio, if SMS driver has Twilio, we're going to give it Twilio. If it's log, it's going to do log. If it's the default, it's going to default to the log. So like if there wasn't anything in here and this was null, it would match the default. Now that we've got them swapping out, I am going to update the Twilio code to just say that we're sending from Twilio. So that way you can see that this is actually working. Okay, so we're going to delete this code because we're not going to actually send a text message, but what we are going to do is use the log. Okay, so in our env, let's switch this to Twilio. Let's open up the log, clear the log, and let's send another SMS. Okay, so it looks like it's still using the default for the log. Let's figure out why that might be happening. The reason that's happening is because we haven't put in the class that's actually being returned here. Let's put that in here. Let's use that. And so now when we run it, let's clear out the logs. Now look at that. We've got sending text message from Twilio. Here's the biggest benefit. When we look at our command, if we need to change or add, let's say we need to add another provider, we don't have to update this code. This code stays untouched. This is one of the biggest and most important aspects of this because your core business logic is not changing. This is a more simple version of what you may encounter in an actual application. The command might have more logic, or your service or your action or whatever kind of class that you do your business logic would probably have more lines of code here. But the idea is this command does not know anything about the implementation details because it does not need to. Because what happens is if we want to test this, this is super easy to test. All we need to make sure is that the send function is being called. And even then, it's maybe not even worth testing in this case because there's no real logic. This is very linear. There's no logic happening here. The thing that we might want to test maybe is the provider to make sure that the provider is giving us the correct implementation. That would be important. But this makes our job so much easier. So let's briefly go over what we've done here again. So this SMS is actually what this is type hinting is the SMS interface. That SMS interface is being resolved by this SMS provider. This provider is using the match function based on the SMS driver that's in our env. Only and only if it's Twilio will it actually send a text message. So if you do need to test something, locally and you actually need to send a text message, that sometimes does happen, you can do that very easily. It takes one of these providers, it binds it to the interface. Again, this is the interface class. It then comes back to the command, passes it in here. Laravel does this on the fly, grabs this information, and then actually sends the text message. And those two implementations are really easy. We can see that the log and Twilio, they're identical right now, but previously, you could have anything in the Twilio. You could have your own constructor arguments and all of that. So that's the really big benefit of, doing this kind of stuff. If you enjoyed this video or this video helped you at all, feel free to smash that like button, subscribe, and leave a comment. Thank you for your support.